Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to this video on creating multiplayer FPS in Unity. Today we are going to be creating some nameplates, which means a piece of UI that floats above our player's head and it can pretty much display any kind of information. Today we're going to be implementing the username of the player and the current amount of health the player has, but you could easily display other stuff such as ammo on there or some statistics or whatever. So really exciting video, and let's just jump right into it. So as you can see, I'm here in Unity, and what I want to begin with is kind of just bringing our player in here and then sketching out the UI. So if we just focus on our player, right click and go to UI and then canvas, we can create a new canvas that sits as a child object of the player. And we want to change this canvas to a world-based canvas so that it will follow our player around. Let's also reset the rect transform here in order to kind of bring it in, but it's still huge. So let's just go to the scale here and change that to something like 0.01 on all axes and hit F again, and you can see that's much more manageable. So now we can kind of bring this UI up. We can switch into 2D mode and it will be viewed from behind, but that's all right. We'll just fix that in a second. And we can maybe bring it down a tiny bit as well. So under this canvas, let's go ahead and create a new UI element, and let's just create a text object. And we can maybe just size this to fit on the size of our canvas. So just do something like that. And we can maybe scale it down a bit. And let's also center this on the horizontal and the vertical axes. So that looks pretty good already. And let's change the text here to something like username, just for filler. And let's also change the color to white. You could go in here and add a shadow or different kind of colors, but I actually just want to keep it totally white. I think that works just fine. And you can see again here that it's currently flipped. So let's just go in and select our canvas and rotate it by 180 degrees. So you should see now that our username faces in the right direction. And we can go ahead and change the text name here to username. And of course I also want to add a health bar, but I think we should begin with the username just to get that working, and then we can add the health bar in just a second. So for now I just want to take the canvas here and move it down a little bit just to make it look a bit better, and that is pretty much all I want to do for the UI so far. So what we should do now is add some kind of script that will set the username equal to the actual username of our player. And let's do this by adding a new component to our canvas here. And let's call it something like player nameplate. And let's just double click on that to open it up in Visual Studio. And we'll have a look at how we can get the username from our player component. So it opened up on my secondary monitor here. I'm just going to drag it over. And I'm also just going to get rid of all of the different scripts that we had open before. So the first thing that we want is a reference to a UI element, and therefore we need to include unityengine.ui. We also need to go in here and create a public. Of course, we can make this a serialized field, so we don't need to make it public, but we want to have a text object, which is our username text. And we also want a reference to our actual player, so the player component, and let's just call that one player. So what we could do is easily put this inside of the start method. However, we want to make sure that our player's username has actually been set once the start method is called. And so we have to be a little bit careful there, because it might take some time for the server to link that or to synchronize that to all of the different clients. And since this is going to be displayed on all clients, we can't be totally sure that the start method will work for that. We could put in a small delay, that would work fine. We could also kind of reference the player nameplate script with the player setup script, so that once the player's username is changed, we call the function on this one. But I think that's just going way overboard. Instead, what I want to do is simply shoot it into the update method. And that is of course a tiny bit more taxing, but we're really going to be using the update method anyways, because we want to update our health all the time. So we'll just include it in here. Again, if you're super worried about performance, you can go ahead and put that maybe on a coroutine, on a fixed loop, or again, synchronize it with the player. But I think this is going to work just fine for our needs. Really, this isn't what you should worry about when you talk about performance, not for the first many hours at least. Cool. So inside of our update loop, we can simply go and say username dot username text equals player and then .username. And remember, username is a variable that sits on the player. It's just a public string, and we've made sure to mark it as a sync variable. So if we just find our player here, you can see the username there, and we also have it here. And by default, it just says loading, and it's set through our player setup script. And because it's a sync var, it means that we can use it even though we're not on the server or we're not on a client. We can use it from anywhere. We don't have to worry about kind of our position in the whole network hierarchy. So we can just go ahead and set it directly here, and that should work just fine. So again, this should actually work right out the bat. So if we just go in here now, find our canvas where we have our player nameplate script, and let's actually just rename this to player. Actually, let's just do nameplate canvas. We should be able to just drag in our username text and our player, which sits under the player. And we should be able to just hit apply and delete that player. And now when we run the game, we should see that working. So if we just go into our login menu here to make sure that we log in with an appropriate username, and we go through and type in something like test123, test123, which is our test user. And it's going to log in, and I can see there's someone there. That's awesome. We can host a test game, and now we should see that it says test123 has joined. And if we go into the scene view now and find our player here, you can see that we have our UI element in here. So that's awesome, and it's going to follow the player around. One problem with this is that if we have multiple players, so let's say we have a player over here, you can see that it doesn't look too good when we view it from the side. And this is where we are going to need some kind of billboarding script. And billboarding is basically the act of rotating some kind of 2D element to always face the camera, so that no matter where you view it from, it's going to look great and not, well, distorted and almost disappearing from the side here. So we're just simply going to rotate the entire nameplate here towards the camera that is viewing it. And we'll do that in a second, but firstly I really want to go ahead and make sure that it works in all other ways in terms of the functionality that we want to have. So let's just go and find our main level again here. Let's drag in our player, and let's just fix a thing. So one problem that we currently have with this is that if we were to go ahead and kill our player, what would happen is our player would of course not disappear from the scene. Instead, what we do is we kind of disable all of the components that we might that are visible in the scene. So we basically, you can see in here under the player, we have this disable on death. We disable the shoot. We disable the controller there. And we also disable these objects here. We disabled all of the graphics. And we disable the camera, which means the camera itself and the weapons. So that makes the player kind of disappear from the scene, but we're still able to do some stuff behind the scenes. And what I want to do, and I just need to make sure that I re-enabled everything, it looks like it. What I want to do is also disable the nameplate canvas, or else it's just going to sit there or float there after a player has died, and that's going to look super weird. I mean, some games do this and have the UI just sit there so you can see, oh, a player just died there, especially if you want to not just disable the player, but maybe have him fall to the ground and have some kind of death animation. Then you probably want the UI to stay there. But I think in our case, we definitely want to get rid of it. So basically, we'll just go under the player script here and utilize the fact that we already have an array that we can just add another element to and drag in the nameplate canvas. And there we go. Now it's going to be disabled when the player dies. And we can go ahead and hit apply on that. Awesome. So now we can go ahead and add some health to this nameplate canvas. And in order to do this, I actually want to utilize the fact that we almost created this in the previous video under the player UI. So let's just drag in our player UI here and have a look at how we set that up. So let's shift into 2D mode. And you can see that we have in here a thruster fuel and a health bar. And the health bar here is set up in a very simple way. You can just copy the settings. We have this background image here, which we can see if we just scale this down. You can see there's the background image. It's just a tinted black image with a bit of transparency. And then on top we have a colored image here with also a bit of transparency that we simply size up and down depending on our health percentage. And we also have an icon, but we don't really need that. So you could, of course, go ahead and set this up once again. But instead, I'm just going to utilize the fact that we already have it in here and just copy that by hitting Control-C or Command-C if you're on the Mac. And then let's duplicate it under our nameplate canvas. And you can see that it currently doesn't want to go under there, so let's just drag it under as a child. And let's also reset the rect transform. So now if we hit F, it focuses in on it, and you can see that it is indeed here. So let's just go into 2D, and we can easily work with this even though it's flipped. All we need to do is just kind of scale this down on the X or on the Y. Drag it down. I want to scale it down even more. I also want to get rid of that icon. There's no reason for us to have it there. It's very clear what this is. Let's scale it down to somewhere around there maybe. And also maybe scale it in a tiny bit. I don't think there's any reason for it to be that large. And I think the spacing between the two elements is fine. So let's just take both of them and drag them up a bit. Let's shift out a 2D view and see how that looks. And I think that looks really, really cool actually. So we'll just go with this for now. And you can of course always spend more time fiddling around with it. And I definitely recommend that you do so. These tiny details are what kind of differentiates a poorly, quickly made game from one that feels polished and ready to go. So awesome. So now that we have our health bar in here, of course, we also need to change it through the script. So let's go into our nameplate canvas and then our player nameplate. And let's add the functionality here. And again, it's going to be done the exact same way that we did the health bar for our player UI. Basically, we just want a serialized field here, a reference to a rect transform, which is going to be our health bar fill. So let's call it health bar fill. And then in the update method, all we do is set health bar fill.localScale equal to a new vector 3, where the coordinates are the kind of health percentage, and then 1, 1 for the other axes, because we want it to always be scaled 1 on the Y and 1 on the Z. The Z really doesn't matter, but we just put 1 there. And then for our health percentage here, we use the fact that we just created a function under our player that divides our current amount of health with the maximum amount of health that we have in order to get a value between 0 and 1. So we simply go player.getHealthPercentage. And again, if you haven't watched the previous video and this is confusing to you, go back, watch it. It makes a lot of sense. So now we can just save this out. And if we make sure to reference everything inside of Unity, it should actually be working right away. So we can just go and take our health bar, drag it under our health bar fill, and we should be able to now just hit apply on that player and delete him. Also delete the player UI. And I actually just want to make a quick test build. So just hit Control B or Command B if you're on the Mac. And basically, this is not, of course, going to work with the billboarding. It's still going to look kind of weird, but we'll fix that in a second. I just want to make sure that all of our core kind of mechanics when it comes to this UI piece are working. So let's just go into our login menu. Let's log in with our test user, test123, test123. Let's do the same on our secondary build here, test1234. We'll use a secondary test user. Let's create a test host game. Let's do the same over here, test, and wait for it to join. And hopefully we should see a health bar and a username for both users. We do. And if I shoot this guy now, you can see that decreasing. Okay, so that's one thing that we have to fix. And this is why it's always great to play test things. Sometimes I just refuse. I think this is too simple. I don't have to test this. And then, of course, something stupid isn't working. So the problem here is that we've set the anchor point for our image here in the wrong place. So you can see it scales towards the center. You could want that, but I don't think that it's really nice. So, but you can see it works, and you can see how it resets once the player respawns. There we go. It's back to normal, and it works on the other player as well. Awesome. So let's just leave the room here. Let's kick out this player and let's quickly fix that bug. All we need to do is go into our main level, drag in our player, find our nameplate canvas, find our health bar, and let's focus on it. Switch to 2D mode, and you can see our anchor under the health bar fill here is currently set to the bottom center. So let's just change that. You can either just drag it over, or you could set it manually. We want a pivot of 1 on the X? 0? 1 on the X apparently. No, that's the right. Alright, it's just because it's flipped. We want a 0 on the X and a 0.5 on the Y. So that should set it up so that our health bar, once we actually scale it down, should kind of decrease in that direction. Awesome. So that looks a lot better. Cool. So let's have a look at implementing a camera facing billboard. And I kind of thought about this and thought, I'm just going to do this on my own. It can't be that difficult. And it really isn't that difficult. But what I thought was I would just go in and then I would rotate the UI piece to always point towards the camera that is looking at it. I mean, that makes sense, right? So if we're standing over here, we would want the UI piece to point in this direction. That's actually not correct. What you want instead is have the UI piece point in the direction that the camera that is facing it is looking. And there's a difference there, because if we are, say, looking over here, then we want, let's say we're looking like this. Then we don't want this UI thing here to point towards us. We want it to point in the same direction that we are looking. And it's really simple to do this through code, but the way that I discovered this was a thing, I just thought you should know this, is I went into Google and I just typed camera facing billboard Unity. You can see it's there. And the first thing that pops up is, of course, on the Unified Community Wiki. It's an awesome place, and you can see there's always already a script in here that works. So I just took this part of the code here inside of the update loop that actually does the transformation and copied it. So let's just do that now. You can copy it from here, and I'm just gonna quickly go through. We can find our nameplate canvas. We can create a new script. You could also put it under the player nameplate, and we'll just call this one camera facing billboard. And let's double click on that, open it up. And all we really want is to do a bit of code inside of the update loop. What we want to do, and you can see here, let's just paste in the code. They're using a variable that they declare called mCamera. Let's instead create a reference to our main camera here. So a camera cam equals camera.main, and then we'll just use cam here and here. So basically what they're doing is they're using transform to look in the direction that the camera is looking, and they do this by taking our position and adding onto that the camera's rotation multiplied with the forward vector. So that gives us the that gives us a vector that points in the direction that the camera is looking. And then we kind of rotate this along the cam.transform.rotation multiplied with vector3.up. So that's what we use to orient ourselves. I'm going to have to draw this out in order to explain it more carefully, but just know that this piece of code makes the UI piece rotate in the direction that our camera is looking. Awesome. So now let's just save this, and you can see how awesome it is that you can just, that's some of the best, probably the best thing about using Unity is the community, and that the fact that there's so much learning material here. So let's just save this now, and it should work. Only one thing is we need to make sure that camera.main is actually referencing the correct camera, because you can see in the scene here, we have both a scene camera that's tagged as main camera. We also have the camera of our player, and all of the other players have cameras as well. So basically what the camera.main does is it returns the first instance of an active camera tagged as main camera. So in our case, scene camera is going to be disabled. It is tagged as main camera, but it's not active, and therefore it's not going to be chosen unless we die and it shifts to the scene camera, in which case main camera is going to use the scene camera. So that's exactly what we want. And in case of all of the other players, we don't want it to face towards them. We want it to face towards our local player. Well, luckily, we disabled the cameras on all those players. So only our player has an active camera. So actually, right out of the gate, it should work as long as we go and select our player's camera and tag that as main camera as well. And now we can go ahead and hit apply. We can delete our player. We can go into our login menu. We can make a build. And now everything should actually just be working, hopefully. And I say hopefully. So I'm just going to have a sip of water here. And let's see. So let's hit play here. Let's log in with our test user. Let's log in with our second test user. Let's create a room. Awesome. And let's join that room over here. And we should see that all of it is working. So if I now just kind of move this over so we can see both screens. And I'm actually just going to jump down here. You can see that the UI now always faces the player. That's awesome. And if we were to say, kill this player here, so look over on this side, kill this player. Oh, but I see we still have some kind of offset there. So we still have to fix the anchor point. I don't know why that didn't apply. But you can see here that it still works even though we switched to the scene camera. So that's awesome. So let's just leave the room here, have a look at our anchor. I might not have applied that correctly. So let's just drag our player in here. Let's find our nameplate canvas, our health bar fill. And yeah, for some reason the pivot is still off. So I don't know why, but it is. So what we'll do is simply shift to 2D mode here so we can see what's happening. Shift to the 2D controls. So it actually, why is this happening? So we have 0 on the X, we have 0.5 on the Y. That should be just fine. Just a moment, I'm just going to figure out what's going wrong here and I will be right back. Alright, so I found out what the problem was and it was actually a little bit tricky to wrap my head around, but here we go. So if we just throw in our player here into the scene and we find the nameplate canvas and have a look under the health bar and the health bar fill, we can see that the anchor point is indeed set to the correct side. However, if we have a look at how the image stretches, you can see that we currently have it set to stretch to fill the entire health bar. That won't work. That means that essentially when we do the local scaling, it's going to do so on both sides at the same time. And that's not what we want. We want instead to set the stretch to the center here so that our anchor point here is centered. And you can go ahead and move it over here, but you can also leave it in the center. This is just going to make sure that when we stretch using the anchor point set over here. So that should be fixed now. And another thing that I thought of while I was fixing this bug is the fact that our player will currently be able to see his own UI. And that might be visible if you're just looking straight up into the air. So in order to get rid of this, I kind of thought, well, we could go in and add to the player setup a reference to the nameplate canvas and we can disable it there or something. But that's really way too complicated. What we could do instead is utilize the fact that we already have a game object here called graphics that is enabled and disabled using the player setup. So what we'll do instead is just take our nameplate canvas, drag it into the graphics, hit continue there, and we'll go under our player, find our player script. Let's now remove that third entry we made and just have it use the graphics one instead. So that means that it will be disabled on death. And because the player setup already have a reference to the player graphics, it will also be disabled on the local player. So now we should be able to just hit play on this player and remove him from the scene. And let's also take our two scripts and drag them under the scripts folder just to clean up nicely. And we can then go into our login menu here and shift over to 2D mode and let's have a look at it. Here it is. And let's also hit Control B to build the player. And now I think everything should be working. So hopefully we will do it right this time. So we can see that booting up. Let's go and hit play. Let's try that one more time. Hit test 1 2 3, test 1 2 3. Do the same over here. Test 1 2 3 4, test 1 2 3 4. I should really have made some easier passwords, and then we can create a test room, and we can join that test room over here. You can see already now that when we look up, it's not there, and if we were to inspect this inside of the scene, we can see. If we shift out of 2D mode and go and find our player here, you can see that we are able to see it, but the difference is the game object is not disabled, but it's actually set as the layer don't draw. So if we have a look at our nameplate canvas, you can see that it's set to don't draw, which means that our camera won't actually display it. Awesome. So our other player is in here, and I should be able to just shoot this guy, and you can see the health bar goes down in the appropriate direction, and we can kill him, and he disappears correctly. So everything is now working, and it should be the same for the other client here. Awesome. Great. So that was basically all I wanted to show you in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you want to see next. I have a few things that I want to do, also a few bugs that we have to fix. One thing that that I am aware of is the fact that our ammo does not reset whenever we die. So I know that, but it's not enough for one video, so I will shoot it in somewhere. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks to all of the awesome Patreon supporters who donated in November, and a special thanks to Sultan El Sharif, Faisal Marifai, James Calhoun, and Robert Bonham. Become a patron yourself at patreon.com/Brackeys.